It has been a challenge. Well, this is something that came to Congress only 2 weeks ago. Secretary Paulson and Chairman Bernanke, brought a proposal to leadership on both sides of the aisle, saying they were very concerned about what was going on and they needed to unfreeze the credit markets, and particularly, needed the funding so that they could go buy illiquid assets. Now this is, it's good that this is being taped so that people will have an opportunity to learn about it and want to know more about it, because it happened so quickly. I felt that the media didn't have a chance to keep up with it. And so it was very quickly called a bailout, like as if there was a $700 check being written to Wall Street executives. And that's really not what it was. What it was essentially a line of credit of $700 billion made available that the Treasury Secretary could pull from and use that to procure illiquid assets. Those could be mortgage-backed securities, which was kind of the area of focus, but it wouldn't be limited to that. He could also invest in college loans or other types of securities that people wanted to get off their books because the market had essentially dried up. There was no market for them anymore, and that would allow liquidity to flow back. Also, part of the reason they needed to do that is there was because of no market and because of the mark-to-market rules, there's no valuations so people didn't really know the value of what was on their books. And so people who had capital that might want to buy, didn't know what the value of those assets might be to buy. So part of the purpose of this proposal is to reinvigorate the market by creating one, and through full price disclosure and transparency on here's what we're buying it at a particular asset class, for instance, it will create that transparency that's needed to further stimulate the market. So the plan is they'll buy those assets and then sell them back into the market later. Now, obviously, when they first came to us, this was not a good situation. Nobody in Congress was happy about it. Certainly none of my constituents were happy that we found ourselves in this position. But we did work on a bipartisan basis to respond and to make it a better bill, to make sure that we protected taxpayers' dollars. And we did that in a couple of ways. One, to preclude the golden parachutes that executives who failed us shouldn't be benefiting from those taxpayer dollars. More importantly, to make sure that there would be upside for those taxpayer dollars. So by procuring assets and selling them, there was a profit potential, but we went beyond that and pushed for equity potential, so that through either the reverse auction, which was one option, or direct purchases, that there could be equity in terms of either preferred stock position and or to have warrants that could be procured later, which basically means, for those who aren't in the financial world, what basically means that as companies' profits improve, those financial institutions that we're helping with taxpayer dollars, taxpayers will share those benefits. And the last thing we did, which came in the very final hours of the first bill, was a pay-for. That was promoted by the Blue Dogs, of which I'm part of. John Tanner led that effort. And that was to ensure that if after 5 years there isn't a recoupment of those tax dollars, that the President will have to bring to Congress a plan to ensure that we recoup those funds from the financial services industry and not from taxpayers as a whole. And so that also gives some peace of mind, since both of the nominees for President were part of this legislation and supported it, that they're basically saying, let's keep those costs where the problems started. And so on that basis, I supported it because I had deep concerns about where we were headed economically, and from what we heard from Chairman Bernanke, a historian and one who studied the Great Depression, when he came and testified to us and said, we are at that precipice, that this could be something akin to the Great Depression. We really felt that instead of focusing on the exact detail, was this the perfect plan? And there were certainly those in Congress who didn't feel it was, that the decision really came down to, are we going to act or not act? And I felt it was responsible to act. I'm very proud of my record of fiscal responsibility and accountability. It's what I ran on, and it's what I've delivered against. I got the Lake County Chamber of Commerce Fiscal Watchdog Award, not something that they lightly give to members of Congress. I'm the only person at the table who has voted to cut spending, over $300 billion of spending. That includes farm bill subsidies that I thought were excessive. That includes even the labor HHS. Very strong, worthy programs, but hadn't been cut down to the level that I thought they should have been restrained to in terms of spending. So I have a very strong record there. Relative to one of the things I just want to clear up for people who are watching and have been trying to keep up with what was in this plan, My opponent mentioned the pork-laden necessities. That had nothing to do with the first bill. The first bill was specifically just updated on the making sure we had the funds available to the Treasury Secretary to support that. There was none of the other things that have been labeled pork until the second bill, to try to basically be some of the people who, unlike myself, voted for it the first time. So I want to clear that up. The other thing that I want to mention is those tax extenders that were included, that is being labeled as all pork-laden sweeteners, had gone through the House in a separate bill. And what the Senate did is take those two things and put them together and bring them back. These weren't secret things that happened in the dark of night, although it was done by the Senate, and I don't think the process was perfect. I'm not in the Senate. I'm not responsible for that. But it's also important that what was included in there was $60 billion to make sure that over 20 million families don't have to pay the AMT, the alternative minimum tax. Because we have pay-go budget rules in the House, in order to allow us to shift funds from other places to offset the revenues that would have come from that, that needed to be done, or those taxes would have been applied to plenty of families right here in this district. Now, I don't consider that pork. That's tax relief. One of the other things that was in there, and a lot of people don't realize, is that Chicago, or the Chicago metropolitan area, is the #2 city in wind power. And very important to companies like Winergy, which is right in Elgin and makes wind turbines, is the production tax credit to help this industry get going so that we can really shift to renewable energy sources. So there's some very positive things in there. Now, there have been some things people don't like that, that they're going to pick at, but I think just to educate the American public, I felt that overall there were people who supported this bill and people who voted against it, but at the end of the day, I think people were mostly driven by their conscience on whether they thought it was the right thing to do and or whether they felt how serious our economic challenges were. I think some people, maybe particularly those not connected to the Financial Services Committee and not connected in talking to folks in the industry, didn't maybe see the challenges we were facing. But by that second vote, we had a lot of people come on board and did so that it did get passed.